cough, cough, hint, hint, you will probably see something on an AP exam or an AP essay at some point that talks about these classical civilizations and how the concept of overreach or overextending them is going to play in, and you'll pull from politics, military, or economics to do that. First, we're going to look at China and society and the role of the state in China. Emperor Wu Di is going to start an imperial academy in the year 124 before current era. This is a formal school for future bureaucrats to study the Confucian classics and really focus on the Confucian form of teaching as a preparation for government service. Remember that China is going to use the Confucian teaching as kind of a basis both for politics and for culture. Academy is going to use an examination system. The way you get into civil service is to pass a very difficult, very multi-day exam on the Confucian classics. It's open to all males, regardless of social status, but you have to think about it. Who's going to be able to afford to spend years studying and to purchase the books for studying? The average peasant is not going to be able to do this. This is going to be largely the rich, largely the upper class that get to do this. There are examples. There's a classic example of the pig farmer who becomes an imperial advisor. Again, these exams are going to require years of study, so only those with enough wealth to spend time studying for several years are going to be able to succeed in the exam. So the system still favors the wealthy. Once home villages and towns are going to be seeing this person, and their family is a huge source of pride. They get special carriages and fancy robes. Frequently, they become hailed as symbols of sophistication. This refined behavior, refined speech is going to be an identifying factor of their symbolic status. Okay, as we look at society in China, we're going to go through the different social classes. The landed class, remember, land is a source of wealth, because at this time in history, agricultural production is your major source of income. During the Qin dynasty, most of the land is worked and held by peasant families. But during about 100 years of the before current era, population is increasing, taxation is increasing, and a lot of debt for peasants leads to wealthier landowners buying up the land of desperate peasants. These landowners then use their increasing power to avoid taxation, and they raise armies of their own that can challenge the state. So you kind of start this almost medieval concept of warlords. Meng, the court official, who eventually is going to usurp the throne and engage in starting kind of a systematic attack on those large estates. He's a huge believer in Confucianism, and so he believes a strong and healthy peasant class is the backbone of society. He's going to nationalize and redistribute a lot of land. He's going to set limits on the size of land holdings that a wealthy landowner can have, government loans to small farmers to help them kind of float in between hard times. He's also going to end private slavery, and this is going to provoke a strong reaction from the wealthy elite. Eventually, this means he gets assassinated. But still, the system of these large estates and wealthy landlords is going to create kind of a new social class called the scholarly gentry. They're able to sponsor their young men to study and have the time for those civil service exams. Thus, the bureaucracy continues to be held by the wealthy elite, even though technically it's supposed to be open to everybody. It's dominated by those wealthy landlords. Rents, taxes, military service, and forced labor to the state are going to combine with floods and crop failure. These are all going to put a hugely heavy burden on the backs of the Chinese peasants. In hard times, some of them are going to be dealing with poverty. Some are going to succumb to famine. Others are going to flee and become beggars or bandits. The Yellow Turban Rebellion happens after a series of floods and epidemics. Several of these wandering bands that had fled are going to join up together and form a massive popular movement. By massive, I mean to the tune of almost 400,000 people in the year 184 current era. They're going to be burnt out on the concept of Confucianism, because Confucianism is not working for them. They're dying of hunger and their families are starving. So they're going to turn against Confucianism, and they're going to follow kind of more of a Taoist approach. They're going to use Taoist teachings and mystical rituals, that's going to be kind of the unifying factor. They're going to call for a coming age of more equality and peace, and think of like the egalitarian society where there is no social classes. Pretty typical peasant rebellion. Eventually, the Han military is going to crush them, but remember your dynastic cycle. Famine, floods, peasant uprisings. This is going to be one of the contributing factors to the fall of the Han dynasty. The merchants as a class are going to be kind of held differently as far as prestige in China than they are in other areas. You know, the merchant class in classical China is going to be seen as unproductive, shameful, because they're making a profit, monetary profit, off the labor of the peasants. And remember, the peasants are held in prestige because of their service as the backbone of society. The merchant class isn't going to fit into this Confucian, social class system, so they're seen as outsiders and a social threat. There's a lot of kind of stereotypes that are associated with them, that they're going to be dishonest and deceitful and of poor moral quality, that they hide money that should be going to the state to help, create social structures that help the peasants. Eventually, the state is going to try to keep them in check by placing various restrictions upon them and excluding them from being able to serve for the state. Nonetheless, though, some merchants are going to find corrupt officials that they can buy, or are at least willing to work with them. And they're also going to scheme to find ways to get their sons into those Confucian bureaucracies. Merchants are going to be banned from certain economic activities by the state. They're going to be forced to loan money. They're not going to be allowed to wear particular types of clothing, or ride a horse in the city, or bear arms. There's all these restrictions that really it kind of becomes not very attractive to become a merchant.